Victor Girsa is the director of the Institute of Neuroscience of Systems in the University of Marseille in France. Dr. Girsa completed the doctoral studies in 1996 in theoretical physics and applied mathematics, and since then has contributed to the field of theoretical neuroscience, in particular through the development of large-scale brain network models based on realistic connectivity. His work has been foundational for network science in medicine with translations to clinical application. He's the scientific leader now of the brain simulation platform, the Virtual Brain, and is the leading investigator in the Human Brain Project. He has been awarded several prizes for his research, including the Grand Prix de Recherche in Provence 2018, and has published more than 160 scientific articles. So, well, thank you very much, Victor. As you know, we are having a good interaction with your team related with market analysis and any kind of support that we can deliver to your team. And well, congratulations, by the way, for the work you are presently doing with BEP. And well, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for attending. And here we are to hear your progress with this amazing tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and this very, very kind introduction. Yeah. What I have chosen to, you told me to speak about the activities in work package 1 and the neuroinformatics platform, the simulator, the TVB, and how we are reaching out to industrial, potentially neuroclinical applications. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And the angle I took is I'm thought it may be a good idea to essentially do it a little from the perspective of how did we get here, where we are, yeah, where are we today, and especially with e-brains, what can be the future, what are the potential steps over the next 2-3 years, but also projections over a long term, yeah. And I hope this is appropriate for this group here, yeah, with a particular emphasis on clinical applications, since this is the perspective that my work has taken over the last 20 years. So that would be the yesterday in this context. And what I'd like to emphasize is that we have, over the last 30 years, we have managed to gain loads of understanding of anatomy and structure in the human brain in vivo. And if you just look at non-invasive imaging, how magnetic resonance imaging has changed our field in terms of the structural insight, in terms of the functional MRI, that has been unimaginable. By that time we had PET, yeah, CT, but fMRI, MRI, high resolution MRI has changed our understanding of how the brain works, allowing us to enter on a scale, in particular the network scale, which is very relevant to the functioning of the brain and its dysfunction, because cognition happens on the level of the network. Another breakthrough technology and conceptual revolution happened in the around 2000, when so-called diffusion tensor weighted imaging, tractography, became possible, and we became capable of using this technology of MRI, reconstructing the connectivity, the connectome. Today it's called the connectome, and that is a representation of all possible structural links between certain network nodes. So there is a definition of network node that is required, and it can be more microscopic, more macroscopic, but the network thinking entered and actually contributed a lot to network theory. And today, the expression hubness, centrality, it has entered into our everyday language, at least in science, that people start thinking in terms of network. That is tightly linked to to this arrival of technology. And this had impacted also the development of brain simulation and our understanding of thinking about the brain. It went hand in hand with technologies of high performance computation, supercomputing, so the digital revolution. And when we became capable of running large-scale simulations on very high dimensions, we were able to build very microscopic network, like in the Blue Brain project, spearheaded by Henry Markram, that has then led actually to the Human Brain project. Yeah? Before, there were other European efforts like the Brain Scales project, a FET project at which I also contributed, that was led by Karl-Heinz Meyer at that time. But also the Virtual Brain project, which is a project that I was the scientific leader of, that actually was taking this information on the large scale level, so complementary to the microscopic Blue Brain project approach. Here we had a top-down approach, building connectome-based networks that allowed us, when placed on high-performance computing systems, to run simulations. And where we are today is these complementary approaches are being merged in the Human Brain project and in eBrains. We are building an enormous digital neuroinformatics infrastructure that is capable of using the convergence of these approaches and actually running simulations, theoretical understanding, development of novel technologies of the human brain that have actually real-world applications, yeah, such as implications for surgery and epilepsy surgery, of which I will speak about in a little more detail. So what I want to do is taking this timeline and unpack it a little bit. I will focus in particular on this part here. So how we got to this part, give you a few more details, how it can lead to our understanding of the use of these technologies using eBrains today and in the future, and what perspectives we have from the network perspective in real world applications. Yeah. So for the virtual brain, this complementary top-down approach I just spoke about, what we do there, the thinking is the following. We take advantage of MRI imaging technology, non-invasive, where we actually reconstruct an individual's brain. We can parcellate it into individual network regions. In parallel, we can also use the MRI to run tractography to reconstruct the tracts, so the totality of all possible connections, which is called the brain connectome, and it's also individual. Yeah, we can co-reference these two in the same reference space. So here the nodes, here the connectivity, we put them in the same reference space, and then we span them in a three-dimensional physical space at the inside of the head computationally. So we can tessellate the surfaces, we can build the skull, we can put this network and span it inside. And then we have a geometric form like an avatar, which is a form, but non-functional. The function enters by equipping these network nodes with mathematics that is dedicated to the description of the activity of brain region. These are brain region models that are describing the activity of a population of neurons. So it's not the single neuron that is a target of modeling, but it's a population of neurons, very much like in statistical physics. When we describe the combustion engine of a car, we use thermodynamics such as heat, temperature, pressure, energy. And we're not talking about the molecular motion of every single molecule. So we use collective variables, and this is their level of description that we are taking advantage of. So the procedure is the following. We scan the brains, we reconstruct them in 3D, we parcellate them, we replace each brain region, so brain regions, we replace it by a neural mass model or a neural network node model. We connect it by that person's individual connectivity. Like this, we get an individualized brain model and can can take advantage of the individual variations. Yeah, there is an inter-subject variability in the healthy domain, but also there are pathological variations. Yeah, this is something we can describe on this level as long as it can be imaged. And then we can actually run simulations and can map actually here. What you see here are the sources. We can map directly from the sources on imaging signals, such as in epilepsy, we use stereotactic EEG to explore the different the organization of the epilepsy, but we can also map it on the MEG, the EEG, the MRI, etc. And this is one of the big contributions of this approach, this full brain modeling approach that we have in the Human Brain Project, is that we actually close the gap between theoretical modeling on the source level and go all the way to the sensor level, because our window to the understanding of the human brain is on the sensor level, because this is what we measure. We never measure sources. Yeah, this is impossible. We are always measuring the sensor signals, and there are many elements that we need to take into account in order to make this link. Animal validation is happening in parallel, so we're not just talking about the human brain, but just to give you an idea of what can be done on the animal level. You can take the same approach identically and run it for the mouse or the rat or the macaque. Yeah, these are the other species. This work has been performed already. So the organization is the same network nodes for brain regions, and then you can perform the tractography. And there are different techniques. You can actually start questioning the tractography, the connections. Here's a technology called probabilistic fractography, which makes much longer connections using a probabilistic algorithm. So there you have many more false positives, for instance, because of the algorithm. You can use a deterministic tractography, which has then the tendency of having more false negatives. And you can compare it in the mouse against tracer studies reconstructing the same connectivity. Here we have the advantage that these are all real existing fibers. We can patch them, we can reconstruct them. Disadvantage is this is not individual anymore. Yeah, you need multiple hundreds of mice in order to reconstruct the entire connectome. So there, the approach of personalization is not possible. But you can start making checks, double checks of the technology. And this has been done in this recent paper here, where you use the tracer data, build the mouse, virtual mouse based on the tracer data, and then you can generate signals, and you can actually, like the bold signal, yeah? And then you can take your favorite metric. Here you have the example of a functional connectivity. FC is always functional connectivity. But you can do this also with a real mouse, yeah? And you can actually go and measure, put the mouse into a scanner. We have done this for 19 mice, yeah? And we measured their fMRI. We obtained the bold signals, and we can compute a set of the batteries of metrics to compare them. But you can do this now also the way we do it in the human. You reconstruct the mouse connectome, yeah, using here deterministic diffusion MRI, for instance, and then you get the virtual mouse brain, and you can run it now using the tractography, not the real connectivity as here, and run the simulated bold signals, etc. And then you can get a whole set of validation metrics, question it. And what we are getting from this very systematic and beautiful studies, in fact, this is the information I wanted to get across here in the bottom right corner. This is a predictive power that you have here that is plotted. And what you have here in this vertical bar is scan, rescan, variability, so the predictive power of scan, rescan. What that means is you take a mouse, you put it in the scanner, you obtain the signals. Yeah. Afterwards, you take the same mouse and put it in the scanner and run it again. And then you ask how close is a scan, rescan similarity. That gives you a kind of a baseline for for a reality check. How well can you actually reconstruct the system? Yeah. And here we are doing it with the models. Here, this is a virtual mouse model for with the tracers. And here, with the individual mouse connectome, obtained the one technology, the deterministic MRI, here with the other technology, and here with average or surrogate connectomes. What you should walk away with here is a clearly quantified proof of concept of two pieces of information. Namely, when we take the tracer MRI, the connectome, which is a high resolution connectome with perfect fibers at a very high resolution, yeah, we get a very good reconstructive power or predictive power. Individual connectome is not as good as high resolution, yeah, but it's much better than a generic connectome, and it's actually not that bad, because if scan rescan is about 60%, here we are actually at 42, 43, which is about 80% of reconstruction, which is very good. So the key message here is, with this technology, we can actually, the more high resolution we enter, the better it can get. And the more individualization we enter, the better it can get. And this is being supported by many other studies, but this year was the most systematic one that has been published recently. So these two elements are as messages I want to get across. What can we do now today? Yeah. And excuse me. One application, there are multiple applications. I want to highlight the one in epilepsy because that one is getting us the furthest at the moment. With regard to the translation of the virtual brain technology. Yeah. So in epilepsy, we have the following situation, that epilepsy is a disorder that affects a large population worldwide. It's about 1% of the world population that is affected. Yeah. About 60% of these patients we can control pharmaceutically. Yeah. The remaining 30–40% are actually candidates to either stimulation or brain surgery. Yeah? There is no other technology in order to treat them, so you need to take an invasive approach. Yeah, open the brain and resect typically what we call the epileptogenic zone. There we are on a level of about 60 to 70% success rate in temporal lobe epilepsies, and sometimes up to only 25% surgery success rate in frontal lobe epilepsies, parietal lobe epilepsies, etc. So we are around 50 to 60% of success rate in the surgery. This success rate has not changed over the last 50 years. I'm plotting only 30 years here because I don't have another graph, but if you look at the statistics, it has been more or less the same over the last 50 years. That is the current situation. Yeah. And when you enter into, in order to explore the epilepsy and find the surgical target, what you need to do is you actually insert so-called needles, Talarak needles, into the brain that have contacts in a spacing of multiple millimeters. You insert this in the brain, as I showed you earlier, and then you can get measurements like this that are hopefully in the right brain area. Yeah. So what we do in order to help this particular workflow is the following. We scan individual patients non-invasively. We build the skeleton composed of MRI, so the topography, yeah, of the organization of the cortical and subcortical areas. The topology is provided by the connectivity. We put it together, and then we equip it with mathematics, and then we are able to run the simulations to perform the simulation of brain activity, how it propagates, and also the seizure activity. We can refine it by adding details of individual patients. So like sometimes we see atrophies in the brain or individual lesions. So we can add this type of individual detail. Yeah. And then we are running using methods for machine learning, artificial intelligence, and we are performing so-called model inversion. We are fitting the brain, and we are essentially making it an individual, personalized brain model. Yeah. that then can be used as an in silico platform to make predictions about what is the best area or the minimal area that needs to be resected. What is the best surgical target? Yeah? So when we put this in eBrains, at the moment, we are taking, in addition, the information that is available in the Human Brain Atlas. So Timo spoke to you recently, and we are actually biasing the individual network nodes by this particular information. So we're not only using information from the individual patient, but also the high resolution information that is available, the multi-scale information that is available for the individual network nodes. And then we are running it through our data fitting pipeline to obtain the best fitting individual subjects brain model. That is our working flow, our workflow, our process. And then we can do the following, what you see here. This is coming from simulation. This is for a particular patient. We can make the implantation, as you see here, for this particular patient. And in blue, you see the individual brain sources. Yeah, and we are once we fit the parameters and we organize the patient's connectome, we can actually run the simulations and actually mimic the seizure organization. Yeah, and then we can go inside and also manipulate, for instance, introduce lesions or remove some brain areas. Here you see, so the previous one was simulation. Here you see on the sensor level a real patient's seizure, empirical data. And now with a virtual brain, you can actually mimic the seizure and run it on the source level. So you make the jump from sources to sensors. On the sensors is what is accessible to us empirically, but we can actually run the whole simulation also on the source level, or as I told you, also fMRI or EEG, MEG, but here for this particular application, the SEEG is important. So we can actually rerun it completely on the estimated source activity and run the simulation independently. Yeah. So that is our current state of the technology that we are dealing with. And we started actually a clinical trial. Yeah, the clinical trial started in 2019. I'll give you a few more details, but I want to show you what the goal of the clinical trial is. Yeah, what we want to do is estimate best the epileptogenic zone, as you see here, before the surgery. So this is an example for a particular patient in the temporal lobe, temporal pole. Yeah. And by using the methods, the workflow I just presented to you, taking the model and fitting it best to this patient's data, and thus identifying what is the most likely candidate for the epileptogenic zone. And after surgery, the target is to remove the areas that are implicated being the target for every resective surgery in epilepsy. We have started before the trial. We have started. We had a small patient cohort that showed us promise that we can actually have a very good prediction in terms of angle score. Angle score is the classification of the surgery success. Yeah. And when the patient is seizure-free, you typically have an angle 1 or angle 2, so very few seizures. And angle 3, 4 means that the surgery has been essentially a failure. And that's what you see here. That was for the initial population that we dealt with prior to the clinical trial. And the significant difference when you look at what was performed in terms of surgery and what would have been the proposal of the virtual epileptic patient technology that we are developing here, you see that the correspondence is better. So number of unexplored regions is smaller. So the correspondence is better when the patient was seizure-free and became worse when the patient was not seizure-free. And that guided us into the clinical trial that is organized today as follows. Yeah, we have 13 reference centers in terms of epilepsy that are collecting over 4 years, 400 prospective patients. the data being centralized, anonymized in Lyon, and then being sent to the database in Marseille, where we are actually performing a virtualization of every single patient. And then we are splitting it into a VP positive and VP negative group, which means half of the patients, the information is actually being sent back to the individual reference centers. The other half we do not send out. Yeah. So we have actually a control group. Yeah. And for half of these patients, they then take the surgery recommendation of the virtual brain into account, with the outcome being to see whether over these 4 years with the 400 prospective patients, actually the surgery success has improved or not. So it started in June 2019. Yeah. We are doing this in parallel also with an industrial partner, Dassault System, which is a large software company, French software company, that is developing a first prototype to see whether this type of technology can be actually translated. And at the moment, a startup is being created with regard to this as we speak. I think the creation will happen next month, yeah, in May. So we have first results for the prospective patients today. So this is an older slide making reference to more than 50 patients. Actually, we have right now 150 patients went through the trial already, and we are at 78, 79 patients that have been sent back. The results remain promising. You can now apply a whole battery of statistics. You'll be using, for instance, statistics of precision and recall, yeah, which is equivalent to sensitivity and sensibility. It essentially goes into the same direction. The precision is bigger when the patients are seizure-free, when computed, the precision when computed of the predictions with regard to the technology that we are developing and clinical hypothesis, and the precision goes down when we have a dissonance and the patient is not seizure-free. Seizure freedom is defined only 1 year after surgery, so it takes some delays. That's the reason why we have only 23 patients post-operatively at the moment, but now it should start climbing up the numbers very rapidly. So this is what is happening now in terms of an application of epilepsy, translating the technology directly into a clinical trial, talking with startups and already large industrial contributors to developing first commercial prototypes to move forward in the applications. Where we want to go with this is essentially to open it up to other diseases, to other interventions beyond surgery, including brain stimulation, including pharmacological treatment. And the vision is that we explore and maximize our capabilities of building a personalized, so a patient-specific in silico brain model on the level that is relevant for us to explain the brain imaging signals. Yeah. When we want to go deeper down into causality, then we have to link up with a single neuron models where we have actually access to the individual physiological neurochemical mechanisms. But for a large level of applications, it is sufficient to stay on the level to explain brain imaging signals, use it as an in silico platform. Personalization is very important, and then actually go into the direction of discovering novel treatments and potentially biomarkers, which is a very active field. So we are taking full advantage of eBrains here, where we are actually taking all the knowledge that is organized in the knowledge graph, coming from many decades of research in different laboratories, yeah, being organized, being curated, and being made available in a harmonized environment that is searchable, that can be used, that can be organized in a space that is relevant for our application. This is a human brain atlas, yeah, and then can be directly translated into a modeling environment, the virtual brain, which allows us essentially to take all this knowledge that we have here, reduce it to a particular statistics, represent it in the space that is relevant for us, and then map it upon the model parameters, the mathematical parameters that we have in the model. Because like this, we have the maximum of information in there. Yeah, and I remind you what I gave you as messages coming from the mouse study. What matters is high resolution information on the one hand side, and individual patient-specific information on the other hand. Both were contributing factors. Yeah, and that allows us now to actually go into much more detail. Here you have the individual workflows. So we can put the human brain atlas biasing the individual network nodes that we have and go through the workflow that we just discussed. This year's the specific application for the SEG, but we can also go in other directions, such as we can build individual cohorts of many different virtual brains. This is something that is happening now with the application of healthy aging, how to stay healthy aging, pathological aging, building cohorts, explaining causally through this approach, through this modeling approach, the variability we have in there and predicting individual brain health trajectories. Yeah. So how do we do this now, taking full advantage of eBrains, the eBrains environment? It allows us to go from the current resolution that we have. At the moment, we are typically using about up to 200 network nodes, which gives us actually a huge region size, 10 to 20 square centimeters for one region, which is actually very big. Yeah, and then we have a resolution of multiple centimeters. We can actually, this causes issues, for instance, when we want to map from the source to the sensor. So there's a huge variability in there because a region of this size becomes a network point, a network node, a point-like structure. So there is a large error source. We can overcome this, yeah? And the way we do it is essentially we are increasing the resolution that you see here from 100 to 200 network nodes to almost continuous, spatially continuous models, providing us with a very high sampling. And today, we can do this running it on our high-performance cluster. So here in my institute, we have a high-performance cluster running on a very powered workstation. We can run it with 20,000 nodes. That gives us a resolution like this, which is still appropriate for clinical applications. Where we need eBrains is when we go to 260,000 nodes. There we are in the sub-millimeter resolution range. And below this, I actually don't want to go. This is still wonderful because there the statistical physics approach for the population still makes sense. Anything below that, we need to go to the Blue Brain project and take their resolutions. But this year is still good enough for clinical applications. This is good, very good for research. Yeah. But this requires eBrains. This here is a little limit. You need a high-powered workstation in 10 years or in 5 years. It will be perfectly sufficient with normal workstations. Yeah. And one of the key reasons is with this resolution, do you see what I'm plotting here? Little vectors. So these are dipolar momentum, and electric activity is always a current which has a direction. Yeah. And this we can plot now, which actually determines the fields that you measure with the sensor. So this was one of the biggest error sources, or sorry, is one of the biggest error sources that we have in our clinical trial. Yeah. Now we can introduce, due to this high resolution, these from ultra high field MRI, we can actually reconstruct individual fiber tracts. It's still possible to do this patient specifically and then connect individual areas that are now highly resolved. Before, these areas were one single point. Now they are available in millimeter resolution. And what we can do And this is happening in collaboration with Markus Axer in Jülich, with the big brain of Katrin Amunds. We can use post-mortem data that are being reconstructed here using a technology which is called PLI. Yeah. And there we have already 3 post-mortem brains that are being scanned in my work package 1 in HPP, and we are reconstructing them, and there we're getting this type of high resolution information that I was talking about, and I was showing you that was a best predictor, but it's still lacking the patient specificity. We are now building workflows where we can put these 2 things together. Yeah, and then we can run simulations like this. And here you see a first simulation using this type of next generation virtual brain model, virtual big brain, we are referring to it, where you have activity propagation across the cortex, yeah, and not just from one point to the other. And these are the type of activations that are being observed by ECOG, for instance. Here I have an example of the human, I emphasize human hippocampus, where we get contributions on the one hand side from Madrid, Javier de Felipe on the one hand side, and Huib Mansfelder from Amsterdam on the other hand, and providing us with data to reconstruct high resolution reconstructions of the hippocampus, and you have the SEG needle. This hippocampus was 2 points until now. So just to tell you the errors that we make when we take this type of simulation, until now, what we are running in the clinical trial, we have a distance mapping only because we cannot orient the dipoles, because we have points only, we don't have the surfaces. So all we can do is estimates like this without direction. With a high resolution virtual brain, we can actually now currents going outside, blue means currents going inside. We get the much more detailed mapping. And this mapping, in addition to this, has already the right orientation. For instance, this here would cancel each other, but we don't know this in the current state-of-the-art model. So you see actually the big improvement that eBrains is providing us. So with this example, along the very intuitive example of high resolution application of using the computational resources of eBrains, what we can actually do better in already what is state of the art. Yeah. In addition, the Human Brain Atlas provides us with detailed information that biases the parameter. The mapping on of this is being developed. Yeah, and then we get better high resolution models with the techniques that I pointed out in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Specifically, Bayesian inference is what we use to make them more patient specific. And these are ongoing projects. Now, not only just from my lab, but with various colleagues in Berlin, in Toronto, in Geneva, in Brussels. Yeah. So the idea is we want to exploit, on the one hand side, the personalized capacity of the brain networks to minimize evasiveness. Examples you have here, sometimes you don't want to stop the seizure because the seizure originates in areas that are inoperable, but there are already, by performing some disconnection techniques, and you know how the seizure is organized, you can use the in silico platform to actually stop, not to stop the seizure, but stop the propagation. And here you see an example. A seizure is symptomatic, means the patient shows clinical symptoms when it propagates, but it's asymptomatic when the seizure still is being triggered, but it does not propagate. So it leads to a huge relief of the patient, even though the areas have not been operated. Something else, what we are exploring, and this is done with Jorge Gonzalez Martinez at Pittsburgh in the US, and the company in Europace, is laser surgery, where we go actually through these drill holes, and rather than making this big resection, you go and you actually burn out some of the tissue just to control the network. Yeah, this you can do through the existing drill holes. So that's minimally invasive. Something that is already happening here in Marseille is, rather than making a big resection, you can actually disconnect areas. Yeah, so you make an incision. Yeah, it's a network, and the network does not only have network nodes, but it also has links. So you can start controlling the links, making disconnections and keeping the tissue inside, but you have to know how. Yeah. This is an approach that is being currently explored in terms of disconnective surgery. Animal validation I already spoke about, and many of my colleagues and Svenja Kaspers in Jülich, our team also are looking at healthy aging and Alzheimer, in particular for biomarker discovery. Yeah. Not curative interventions, but diagnostic interventions that are coming very, very early, and other potential tools here. That is Daniele Marinazzo, for instance. He's looking at tumors, yeah, and stroke. So let me stop here at this point. Yes, I'm in time. So that was a big overview of a little, what is the technology behind, how it has developed, where we are going with eBrains, what can be potentially done, and an identification of where the individual groups are. You see here the logo of the virtual brain cloud. We have actually a evaluation this afternoon from 3 to 5 o'clock for that, and which is actually using virtual brain technology for applications of Alzheimer disease, development of novel biomarkers, trying to diagnose it early on before onset of clinical symptoms. So let me stop here, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond to them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Victor, for your very nice presentation of the activities, and I'm sure that we'll have some questions. Could you remove the screen here? Yeah.
Just happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we go. Thank you very much. We can open now the discussions. Do you have any question to Victor?
Yes, I do.
Hi, Gabriel, go ahead.
Well, Professor, first of all, thank you very much and congratulations for your splendid presentation and for the work that is being done. And well, I don't think that you were connected before or my presentation was in Spanish, but we had been working in OncoVision in dedicated brain PET and in synergy with MRI and with CT and with other modalities. So first of all, I am most impressed, I have always been, by the wonderful work that is being done with MRI in terms of the connectivity of the neurons, fractography, really amazing engineering, physics, medical work being done. But do you think that adding what PET adds, which is the intracellular dimension, what is happening inside the neurons, could be valuable? Because, for example, PET has been extensively used in epilepsy, and in some cases, MRI is wonderful, but the sensitivity that it has in epilepsy is around 70%. So, and the sensitivity of PET in epilepsy is around 90%. I'm not saying it's better, but I am saying is that things can be combined in the benefit of the patients. So, do you see any possible role for PET in terms of improving or maybe adding additional information to the virtual epileptic brain? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for this question. It's a great question, actually. And it's right on a hotspot, in fact. PET adds extremely important information. There are multiple imaging technologies, so PET, but also sodium-23 imaging, yeah, which is also linked to excitability, etc. What we are missing in these type of models is the information about the regional variation that is patient-specific. Just a big brain and the brain atlas is providing us with generic gradients of receptor types, neurotransmitters, etc., but nothing that is patient-specific. And the information that comes from PET, the information that comes from sodium-23 imaging provides us with hints that can actually be about disequilibria, for instance, yeah, in terms of excitability, that can actually be converted into information that we can use. It's so-called priors when we perform the estimation and the fitting of an individual patient. The technology that we use in Bayesian inference, we have the capacity of putting in prior information in order to bias the algorithm in a particular direction. And for epilepsy, this is being explored in work package 1. Yeah. Explicitly, we are building for epilepsy a cohort of 30 patients and 30 controls with high field MRI 7 Tesla, MRI with sodium imaging with PET. SEEG, simultaneous EEG, fMRI, so a systematic exploration of this cohort, and then in parallel a control population in order to see whether this information can be actually explored to have a better estimation of the patient specificity and then develop better models. In another example, and by the way, there was also a recent industrial call where actually an industrial partner is entering, thanks to Gonzalo and Guillermo, into the human brain project that is actually wants to develop this technology with PET in order to bias these workflows that I was just talking about.
This is us.
What?
This is us. This is on commission.
They are
they asked you to ask this question, didn't they? Yeah. In addition, there is the following. Very often for epilepsy, you have the seizures. You can also use pre-ictal or inter-ictal activity, but in other diseases, such as neurodegenerative diseases, some of the data features or some of the brain imaging is actually not informative. Yeah. The brain signals, you need prior information because you can actually not identify, it's called non-identifiability, the correct parameters to obtain a patient-specific brain model. So you need to bias it. And there, the PET information is absolutely crucial. Without the PET information, biasing the parameters, we run into an issue in the so-called non-identifiability issue, and we have absolutely nothing. Yeah. For seizures, it's easier because you can even see them by eye. But if you look at resting state of fMRI on the time series by eye, you see nothing. And very often even the dedicated algorithms are being lost. So you need this additional information.
Thank you very much. One short comment, and I promise to shut up. We had been surprised because in the clinical studies we have done with the previous generation to living brain, 1.5 millimeter resolution, there were some inter-ictal patients, epileptic patients. And this was not intended. The study was targeting something different, but the neurologists got interested and they said, can we check this? And we found out that not only in the cortex, the characteristics of PET are very, very differential. They are actually very specific. They have clinical value. But we found out also different activity in some nucleus of the thalamus, which I was not expecting personally. Mm-hmm. So is this, and I know you know much more than me about this for sure, what I am saying is that we saw some deep connections related with epilepsy that I can be an ignorant in many things, but I have not seen them before. And the neurologists were very interested. They said that this, but it's all about what you said about connectivity, but in this case, at the intraneuronal level. Yeah. Thank you.
You know, but this is very interesting because this is where actually the targets for brain stimulation come in. Yeah. Yep. For instance, brain stimulation has the advantage that it's reversible. When you perform surgery, you're done. It's irreversible. But you can turn off the stimulator if you have done a mistake. If you're wrong, you can turn it off. And there you can, for instance, go for the hippocampus. If you want to control the hippocampus, you don't stimulate the hippocampus. You go actually to the pulvinar, yep. Of some of the nodes. And there, this is all empirical. No one really has strategies to explore this. This is a ground to be pioneered now, taking this type of connectivity approaches. Yeah? Yep. So I'm perfectly comfortable with the statement you made. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Any question? I have one, Victor, from my side. You have mentioned that the clinical trial is working until 2023, if I remember well.
22, yeah, approximately. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I understand that then in this case is in the hospitals participating in the clinical trial. There are also several neurosurgeons looking for better information for decision making in neurosurgery. But I understand that the surgery in itself is by using a conventional method. Are you planning the possibility to connect this kind of tools with some robotic surgery for epilepsy? Because at the end, I understand that this information could be also useful as an input for precise placement of in neurorobotics surgery. No, do you feel that there is a possibility to advance in this way?
Actually, yes, and most of the centers we are working with already have surgery robots. Yeah, there is a company called ROSA. Yeah, and most of them have this system, and there is, I believe, also a Medtronic system. Yeah, but so these companies, these surgery robots are already being used in the majority of the reference centers that we are working with. There's something that could be done potentially. So we had discussions about that. Well, we don't need the robots directly for the virtual brain modeling, and the robots are more there to guide the insertion of the needles. Yeah. And what could be potentially done, and there some of the surgeons came to us, they said what could be of interest to them is to link the robot with an MRI and a virtual brain, so they can actually make decision making online when they enter and then make a decision about where to actually, using the laser surgery, where to burn. Yeah. And would like to see what the functional consequences are. So for this, such a loop between robot, surgery tool, MRI you would need for navigation, so you know exactly where you are, and virtual brain could be potentially of interest. But that this is really more at the moment. There are no concrete plans, but these are requests we have already received. But that would be a very big project, because you would need to link up the MRI, a surgery MRI. This is one of these MRIs you can roll in together with a robot, etc. So this is machinery that costs multiple millions. Yeah. Yeah,
I understand it.
Yeah.
Are you planning also to extend the clinical trials to other countries, or to involve other hospitals in the process? Just to cover other things, not fully covered at this moment with the running clinical trial.
Yeah. Well, there will be new questions upcoming and new technologies. We're already discussing another application. So brain stimulation came up multiple times. So this is a direction in which we are thinking. So we are already looking into the setting up of a new clinical trial in which brain stimulation will play an important role. And that needs to be decided whether that will be national or international on the European level. Yeah. So, but that is typically in the hands of the institution, of the medical institution, either the hospital or the National Institute of Health that is running the clinical trial. And there are politics and convenience, administration. There are many other factors that play a role also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any additional question? No? Well, just on time, eh? We have arrived. Well, thank you very much, Victor.
Pleasure. I hope it was useful. Yeah.
For the presentation, yeah. Because my interest is that people connected here could obtain a clear vision about the activities in the project. And then the only way is just to go step by step by trying to cover different things. And then obviously we have here a huge opportunity. I was also explaining that we are hoping we're expecting to receive a good answer from ESFRI to have e-brains as a part of the European research infrastructures. And then many of the entities connected here there could be also users of the scene. But even today, I understand that they can also play with some of these tools that are available in the platform. And then I need to use these events to motivate people, to enter into the platform and then to register themselves and then to be able to play with some of the tools. Yeah. And then I understand that the VIP is also part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Victor.
Thank you.
I thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.